She replaced her sister in an arranged marriage, one look, and the cowboy chose her forever. Aisha's life had always been quiet, predictable, and filled with family responsibilities. She was the second daughter in a humble but loving household in a small rural town. Her days were spent helping her mother in the kitchen, tending to the garden and caring for the younger siblings. She loved her family dearly, and she found comfort in the simple rhythm of her life. Yet despite the calm and the warmth of home, Aisha had always felt a little invisible, a little in the background. Her elder sister, Farah, was confident, beautiful, and charming. Everyone admired her, and she always seemed to be at the center of attention, including that of the local cowboy, Ryan, who had been promised to her in marriage. Aisha had heard about the arrangement many times over the years. Her parents often spoke of it with pride and hope, believing that Farah and Ryan would make a perfect couple. Ryan was well known in the town, strong, dependable, and kind-hearted. He worked on the ranch just outside the village, respected by everyone for his honesty and dedication. While Aisha had seen him around in town, she had never really spoken to him. To her, he was distant, a figure of admiration for her sister, someone out of her reach. She never imagined that one day her life would change because of him, and that she would step into a world she had only observed from afar. It all began one chilly morning when Aisha's household was in a rush of activity. The wedding preparations were in full swing. Farah was supposed to travel to Ryan's ranch that day, accompanied by their parents and a few close relatives. Aisha was helping her mother pack the last items into the trunk when a messenger arrived from Farah's school. Aisha's heart skipped a beat as she listened to the news. Farah had fallen seriously ill overnight and could not travel. The words echoed in Aisha's mind, each one heavier than the last. The wedding could not be postponed. The arrangements were made, the guests had been informed, and the entire town was expecting the ceremony to take place. Her parents looked at her with wide eyes, a mix of fear and urgency. "Aisha," her mother said softly, "you must go in place of your sister. You must stand for her." Aisha froze. She had expected challenges in life, responsibilities, and hardships, but she had never imagined stepping into such a situation. Her hands shook and her mind raced with questions. How could she replace Farah? How could she face Ryan, the man she had admired from afar but never truly known? And most importantly, how could she live with the thought of pretending to be her sister? Despite her fear, Aisha knew she could not refuse. She loved her family and understood the weight of tradition and duty. With a deep breath, she nodded. She would step in for her sister, even if her heart trembled with uncertainty. Her mother embraced her tightly, whispering words of encouragement and blessing. Her father placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder, giving her a silent promise that he would support her. The journey to Ryan's ranch was quiet and tense. Aisha sat in the back of the carriage, her hands folded tightly in her lap, her eyes staring at the passing fields. She thought about the life she was leaving behind, the comfort of her home, and the simplicity she loved so dearly. She also thought about Ryan, imagining how he might react to seeing her instead of Farah. Would he be angry, disappointed, or indifferent? The questions seemed endless and her heart ached with worry. When they arrived at the ranch, Aisha felt her nerves tighten even more. The large wooden gates opened to reveal a sprawling estate, fields stretching into the horizon, and the familiar sight of Ryan standing at the entrance. He was tall and strong, with a calm presence that made everyone around him feel secure. But his eyes, sharp and observant, immediately fixed on her. Aisha felt a jolt of fear and self-consciousness. She lowered her gaze, unsure how to meet his scrutiny. Ryan stepped forward, his expression unreadable. Aisha could sense a flicker of confusion in his eyes, but he remained polite and formal. "You must be Farah's sister," he asked, his voice steady. Aisha nodded, her throat tight. She tried to speak, but the words stuck in her mouth. Ryan studied her for a moment, and she felt as if he could see every doubt, every fear she was trying to hide. The ceremony itself was simple but deeply rooted in tradition. Aisha followed the instructions carefully, copying the gestures and phrases that Farah would have used. She could feel the weight of everyone's gaze, the town watching, her family hoping, and Ryan observing quietly. It was overwhelming, but she focused on each step, each movement, as if her life depended on it. Her heart pounded with every passing moment, but she reminded herself to remain composed. She could not falter now. As the ceremony concluded, Aisha felt a strange mixture of relief and anxiety. She had stepped through one of the most daunting moments of her life, yet the real challenge was only beginning. Ryan approached her afterward, a hint of curiosity in his eyes. "It seems you've handled yourself well," he said, his voice softer now. Aisha felt a small flicker of pride. It was not much, but it was something. She nodded politely, unsure of what else to say. The first evening at the ranch was quiet and reflective. Aisha sat in the guest room, her hands clasped together, replaying the day's events over and over in her mind. She thought about the eyes of the townspeople, the whispers she imagined in the hallways, and Ryan's steady presence. Despite her fear, there was something comforting about his calm demeanor, something that made her feel slightly less out of place. She realized that although this situation had been forced upon her, she could choose how she would navigate it. She could allow fear to dominate her, or she could face it with courage. Meanwhile, Ryan could not shake the unusual feeling he had experienced that day. The young woman before him was not Farah, but there was something about her that caught his attention. She was quiet, yes, but there was a strength in her gentleness, a dignity in her nervousness. He found himself wondering about her life, her family, and the world she came from. It was strange, unfamiliar, and yet intriguing. He could not deny the curiosity that had begun to grow inside him. Over the next few days, Aisha adjusted to life on the ranch. She helped in small ways, feeding the animals, organizing the kitchen, and observing the daily routines. Each task was a challenge, as she had never experienced ranch life firsthand, but she was determined to learn. Ryan watched her from a distance, impressed by her willingness to adapt and her quiet determination. He realized that her presence was different from what he had expected. She was not a replacement in the usual sense. She was someone entirely her own, someone who deserved to be seen for who she truly was. One afternoon, while they were walking through the fields, a small moment changed everything. Aisha stumbled slightly over a loose stone, and Ryan instinctively reached out, steadying her. Their eyes met, and for a moment the world seemed to pause. There was no expectation, no obligation, just a shared understanding, a silent acknowledgement of something deeper. Aisha felt her heart skip a beat, unsure what to make of the feeling rising inside her. Ryan, too, felt a strange pull, a curiosity he could not yet explain. Despite these quiet moments of connection, Aisha struggled with her own insecurities. She worried about whether she could ever truly belong here, whether Ryan would accept her beyond the role she had been forced to play. She feared judgment from the town, from her family, and even from herself. But with each passing day, she discovered a small courage within her, a courage that whispered she could face the unknown, that she could navigate the challenges with grace and determination. The nights were the hardest. When the house was quiet and the stars shone brightly over the open fields, Aisha would lie awake, thinking about the life she had left behind, the sister she had replaced, and the man whose eyes seemed to see more than she could show. She wondered what the future held, whether she could find happiness in a life that had begun with such unexpected circumstances. And yet, amidst the fear and uncertainty, there was a small spark of hope, a feeling that perhaps, just perhaps, life had a way of surprising those who dared to step forward with courage. By the end of the first week, Aisha had begun to settle into a rhythm. She still felt nervous, still wondered about Ryan's thoughts, but she no longer felt completely out of place. She had faced the initial storm, and now it was about learning, observing, and discovering the possibilities ahead. The first look, the first meeting, and the first shared moments had planted a seed, one that would grow slowly, quietly, into something unexpected and powerful. And so, Aisha's journey began. From a quiet, dutiful girl who had never imagined stepping beyond her home, she had entered a world full of challenges, uncertainty, and new emotions. She did not yet know what the future held, but she had taken the first, brave step. Little did she know that her life was about to change in ways she had never dreamed. One look, one meeting, one small moment had begun a story that would reshape her heart, her life, and the life of the cowboy who had chosen her, without even realizing it yet. The days after the ceremony were filled with a strange mix of routine and quiet curiosity. Aisha had begun to settle into the rhythms of the ranch, learning small tasks like feeding the animals, carrying water to the fields, and keeping the household organized. Each task was new, each chore a small challenge, but she approached them with patience and care. Despite the nervousness that never fully left her, she discovered a growing confidence within herself. She could do more than she thought, and in this realization she found a small comfort. Ryan watched her from a distance, noticing everything. At first, he had simply observed politely, keeping the respect that tradition demanded. But as the days passed, he found himself drawn to her, not just because she was fulfilling the role meant for Farah, but because of who she truly was. She moved with quiet purpose, spoke with gentle kindness, and even in her nervousness, carried herself with dignity. There was something refreshing about her presence, something that made the usual routines of the ranch feel different, lighter, more meaningful. One morning, Ryan asked Aisha to accompany him to the far fields where the horses grazed. The sun was just rising, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Aisha felt a flutter of nerves as she walked beside him, unsure of what he might say or think. But Ryan spoke simply, sharing stories about the ranch, the animals, and his daily routines. He explained how he managed the land, tended to the crops, and cared for the horses with patience and precision. Aisha listened intently, fascinated by the life he led, a life so different from hers but equally filled with responsibility. As they worked side by side, a small but significant bond began to form. Aisha learned how to brush the horses properly, how to check for injuries, and how to communicate with the animals through gentle words and gestures. Ryan guided her with quiet encouragement, never criticizing but offering subtle corrections. She noticed his attentiveness, how his eyes softened when he saw her succeed, and how he seemed to silently cheer her on. Aisha felt a strange warmth in her chest, a mixture of pride and nervous excitement. One afternoon, as they were repairing a fence along the edge of the pasture, Aisha stumbled over a loose plank. Ryan's hand was there instantly, steadying her. Their eyes met, and for a moment the world seemed to hold its breath. Neither spoke, yet there was an unspoken understanding between them. Aisha felt a strange thrill, a fluttering in her heart that she had never felt before. Ryan, too, felt a pull he could not explain. A curiosity and admiration for this young woman who had stepped into a role meant for another, but had made it entirely her own. Despite these small moments of connection, Aisha remained cautious. She reminded herself constantly that she was here in place of her sister, that this was not her story to claim, and that any feelings she might have needed to be tempered with reason. She feared judgment, both from Ryan and from the wider community, and she did not want to betray the trust her family had placed in her. Yet she could not deny the way her heart fluttered when Ryan spoke to her kindly or smiled at her quietly. Ryan, on his part, was growing increasingly aware of Aisha's presence in a way he had never expected. She was not Farah, and yet she had qualities that fascinated him: kindness, patience, humility, and a quiet strength that was hard to ignore. He realized that he had spent so long imagining his future with someone else, that he had not allowed himself to consider what might happen if life presented him with a different path. Aisha's sincerity and courage had begun to shift his perspective, opening a door he had never known existed. The first night they spent together in the house after the ceremony brought another small but meaningful moment. Aisha had been helping in the kitchen, preparing a simple meal when Ryan entered quietly. He thanked her for her efforts and complimented her on the meal. Aisha felt a warmth spread through her chest. It was not just the compliment itself, but the sincerity in his tone, the way he looked at her, not as a replacement, not as an obligation, but as someone he was beginning to notice. As the days turned into a week, Aisha and Ryan began to share small moments of personal stories. She spoke of her childhood, her family, and the little routines she cherished at home. He shared memories of growing up on the ranch, his early lessons in responsibility, and the challenges he had faced learning to manage the land. These conversations, simple as they were, deepened their understanding of each other. Aisha realized that Ryan was more than the strong, quiet figure she had imagined. He was thoughtful, patient, and capable of deep empathy. Ryan, in turn, saw layers to Aisha that he had not anticipated: a depth of courage, a humility that did not diminish her, and a kindness that radiated naturally. One evening, as the sun set over the open fields, Ryan and Aisha walked together along a narrow path that led to a small pond at the edge of the property. The water reflected the fading light, casting golden streaks across their faces. They were quiet, but the silence was not uncomfortable. It was a companionable quiet, the kind that forms when two people are beginning to understand each other without needing words. Ryan glanced at her, noticing the way her hair caught the light, the way her eyes reflected curiosity and thoughtfulness. He realized almost with a start that he was beginning to care for her, not because she was standing in for someone else, but because she was herself. Isha, sensing his gaze, felt a small rush of emotion. She tried to focus on the path ahead, on the sounds of birds and the gentle rustle of leaves, but she could not deny the awareness of Ryan's presence beside her. Each step seemed to bring them closer, not physically, but in a way that words could not express. She wondered if he felt the same small pull, the same curiosity, the same cautious interest that she could not yet name. Life on the ranch continued, with its mix of hard work and quiet beauty. Aisha learned more each day, how to mend fences, how to care for the livestock, and how to navigate the routines of a life so different from her own. She made small mistakes along the way, of course, but Ryan never scolded her. Instead, he guided her gently, offering subtle corrections and words of encouragement. It was in these moments that Aisha began to feel a growing sense of belonging, a quiet confidence that she could thrive even in unexpected circumstances. One rainy afternoon, they were repairing a barn roof when a sudden gust of wind caused a loose plank to shift dangerously. Ryan acted quickly, steadying the plank and pulling Aisha to safety. In that instant, Aisha felt the full weight of his protection, his instinct to keep her safe. Her heart raced, not with fear, but with a strange, thrilling awareness that Ryan's concern for her went beyond mere politeness. Ryan, for his part, felt a protective instinct he could not ignore. He realized that his feelings for her were growing stronger, that he was beginning to imagine a future where she was more than just a temporary replacement. As the week drew to a close, Ryan made a small but meaningful decision. He would no longer see Aisha as a substitute for his promised bride. She was not Farah, and she did not need to be. She was Aisha with her own thoughts, her own courage, and her own heart. He wanted to know her, to understand her, and perhaps, in time, to care for her in a way that was true and sincere. The realization filled him with a quiet excitement, a feeling he had not experienced in years. For Aisha, the growing bond with Ryan was both comforting and confusing. She had stepped into this role out of duty, yet she could not ignore the small stirrings of affection that were beginning to emerge. She worried about her own feelings, about the expectations placed upon her, and about the shadow of her sister's absence. But she also felt hope, a tiny, fragile hope that perhaps life could offer unexpected joy, even in the midst of challenges and uncertainty. By the end of the second week, their interactions had settled into a rhythm that felt natural. They worked side by side, shared small meals, and spoke quietly in the evenings. There were moments of laughter, moments of quiet understanding, and moments where words were unnecessary. The spark that had begun with the first glance was growing, subtle but undeniable. Both Aisha and Ryan were beginning to understand that their story, though unexpected, was unfolding in its own way, guided by patience, respect, and the courage to embrace the unknown. And so life at the ranch continued, with its hard work, quiet beauty, and the gentle weaving of two hearts slowly discovering each other. Aisha had stepped into a role she had never imagined, but she was no longer just a replacement. She was becoming someone who mattered, not because of duty or expectation, but because of who she truly was. Ryan, too, was learning to see beyond tradition, beyond the plans made years ago, and to recognize the woman standing before him, not as a substitute, but as a person who could capture his heart, one quiet moment at a time. The chapter of their story was just beginning, filled with uncertainty, discovery, and the subtle beginnings of love. Neither could predict what the future held, but both had begun to sense that something extraordinary was quietly unfolding, a connection that could grow stronger with each shared moment, each act of kindness, and each small demonstration of courage and trust. Life on the ranch had begun to feel more familiar to Aisha, yet every day still carried the weight of uncertainty. She had learned the routines, adapted to the hard work, and even found small joys in the open fields and the animals she cared for. But her heart was no longer at ease. She could not ignore the quiet feelings that had begun to grow inside her, feelings she was not sure she was allowed to have. Every glance from Ryan, every small gesture of attention, left her both thrilled and nervous. She reminded herself constantly, she was here to replace her sister, nothing more. Anything beyond that could lead to disappointment, misunderstanding, or even heartbreak. Ryan, on the other hand, was finding it increasingly difficult to see Aisha as anything other than extraordinary. The more he observed her, the more he admired her courage, her patience, and her innate kindness. There was a sincerity in her smile, a quiet strength in her actions, and a warmth in her presence that he could not ignore. Unlike his expectations of Farah, whom he had admired from a distance but never truly known, Aisha was real, approachable, and full of life. He began to find himself thinking about her even when she was not near, wondering what she was doing, whether she was safe, and whether she knew just how much he was beginning to care. Despite this growing closeness, life on the ranch was not without its challenges. One morning, a severe storm rolled in, sending strong winds and heavy rain across the fields. The horses became anxious, the smaller animals needed extra care, and the barn, which had already shown signs of wear, began to leak. Aisha and Ryan rushed to secure the animals and protect the property. In the chaos, Aisha slipped on the muddy ground, and Ryan caught her just in time, pulling her to safety. Their eyes met in that moment, drenched and breathless from the storm, and Aisha felt a surge of emotion she could not name. She was terrified, exhilarated, and deeply moved all at once. Ryan's steady presence and instinctive protection only intensified the strange, growing bond between them. After the storm passed, they worked together to repair the minor damages caused by the wind. Ryan guided Aisha patiently, showing her how to reinforce the barn, tie ropes securely, and care for the frightened animals. Aisha listened attentively, eager to learn and prove herself capable. Ryan's quiet praise and encouragement made her heart swell, though she struggled to understand the depth of her own feelings. She admired him, not just for his strength and skill, but for his calmness, his patience, and the way he seemed to notice even the smallest details about her. Even as their connection grew, Aisha faced internal struggles. She felt guilt for replacing her sister, worry about the expectations of the community, and fear of misinterpreting Ryan's actions. Her nights were often spent awake, replaying moments of the day in her mind. The way Ryan had smiled at her while she fed the horses, the subtle way he had brushed rain from her hair during the storm, the quiet conversation they had shared while repairing the barn. Each memory brought a mixture of joy and anxiety. She wondered if she was imagining significance in ordinary moments or if Ryan truly felt something deeper. Complicating matters further, the local town began to whisper. A young man who had long admired Aisha before the wedding began spreading rumors, suggesting that she had only stepped in for selfish reasons, that she might not be trustworthy, or that she was trying to steal Ryan's attention. The small comments and suspicious glances reached Aisha, and she felt her confidence waver. She wanted to ignore it, but it stung more than she expected. She confided in Ryan one evening, her voice trembling slightly as she explained the rumors. Ryan's reaction surprised her. He did not dismiss her worries or downplay the situation. Instead, he stood firmly by her side, speaking calmly to reassure her. "I don't care what anyone says," he told her. "You are here because you had to be, but you are here because you are capable, honest, and strong. I see that, and no one else's opinion can change that." His words were simple, yet they carried a weight that settled in her heart. Aisha realized in that moment that he truly cared for her, not as a replacement for someone else, but as the person she was. The couple faced another test when a minor accident occurred during chores. A small fire broke out in the kitchen due to a forgotten candle. Panic surged through Aisha as she tried to contain the flames, fearing she would fail. Ryan arrived just in time, helping her put out the fire safely. As they stood together, smoke settling around them, their hands brushed, and neither of them moved away. The shared danger, the adrenaline, and the relief brought them closer in a way words could not describe. Aisha felt a warmth in her chest and a growing trust in Ryan's presence. She began to realize that, despite the initial fear and uncertainty, she was beginning to depend on him, not just for safety, but for guidance, reassurance, and companionship. Amid these challenges, quiet, tender moments began to emerge. Aisha would find herself laughing at Ryan's dry sense of humor, enjoying his stories about childhood adventures on the ranch, and marveling at the way he could remain calm under pressure. Ryan, in turn, found joy in seeing Aisha take pride in small successes, in watching her determination when faced with difficulty, and in the gentle kindness she extended to both animals and people alike. Each shared smile, each careful conversation, slowly strengthened the connection between them. Yet, the shadow of her sister's absence and the role she had been forced to play never fully left Aisha. She worried that her happiness was unearned, that Ryan might discover he preferred Farah, or that the community might never fully accept her as more than a temporary stand-in. These thoughts haunted her in quiet moments, leaving her restless and hesitant. But Ryan's consistent care, his unwavering patience, and the sincerity of his actions began to chip away at her doubts. She began to see that perhaps love could grow even in unexpected circumstances, that trust and understanding could blossom from shared effort and mutual respect. One evening, after a long day of work, they sat together on the porch watching the sunset. The sky was painted with shades of gold and pink, and the air was filled with the gentle sounds of nature, the rustle of leaves, the distant call of birds returning to their nests, and the faint murmur of the horses in the fields. They spoke quietly, sharing stories of their pasts and hopes for the future. Aisha found herself opening up about her fears, her dreams, and the pressure she felt from family expectations. Ryan listened intently, never interrupting, never judging, simply acknowledging her feelings with a quiet understanding. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Ryan reached for her hand. It was a small, tentative gesture, but it carried an immense weight. Aisha's heart raced. She did not pull away, but she also did not speak. The silence between them was filled with unspoken words, shared understanding, and a promise that neither needed to voice aloud. In that moment, Aisha realized that Ryan's choice to be with her was genuine. She was no longer just a replacement. She was someone who mattered deeply to him. Challenges continued to arise, of course. The work on the ranch was demanding, and the community still whispered in quiet corners. But each obstacle became an opportunity for Aisha and Ryan to strengthen their bond. They learned to rely on each other, to communicate with patience, and to face adversity as a team. Aisha discovered courage she had never known she possessed, and Ryan realized that his heart had found someone truly worthy of care, respect, and love. By the end of this chapter of their story, a quiet transformation had taken place. Aisha, once timid and unsure, had grown into a confident, capable, and compassionate woman, respected by Ryan and beginning to be admired by the community. Ryan, once bound by expectations and distant admiration for a woman he had never truly known, had opened his heart to someone real, someone who had proven herself through courage, kindness, and authenticity. Their relationship, once built on circumstance, was now rooted in choice, understanding, and genuine affection. The spark that had begun with a single glance was growing steadily, like a fire nurtured by trust and shared experiences. Both Aisha and Ryan were beginning to realize that the story of love they were living was theirs to shape, not determined by tradition, obligation, or expectation, but by the quiet, meaningful moments that defined their days together. And as they prepared to face whatever challenges and joys the coming weeks might bring, they did so with a sense of partnership and a growing awareness that the connection between them was real. It was no longer about replacing someone or fulfilling a duty. It was about two hearts recognizing each other, two lives intertwining, and the possibility of love flourishing in the most unexpected of circumstances. The days on the ranch had grown longer, but for Aisha, they no longer felt overwhelming. She had learned to rise with the sun, to embrace the labor of caring for the animals, the fields, and the house. Each day brought its own challenges, but also moments of quiet beauty, like the way the morning light danced across the fields, or the soft, comforting sound of horses moving in the stables. Aisha had grown stronger, braver, and more confident. She no longer questioned her place on the ranch or in Ryan's life, because slowly she realized that she belonged here, not because of circumstance, but because of who she was. Ryan had noticed the change too. The timid, nervous girl who had first stepped in for her sister had transformed into a capable, graceful young woman. He admired her in ways that went beyond physical attraction. He respected her patience, her humility, and her willingness to face challenges head-on. He had grown to care for her deeply, not as a replacement for Farah, but as someone entirely unique, someone whose heart and character had captured his own. Every shared laugh, every quiet moment of understanding had strengthened the bond between them. Yet life still held its tests. The townspeople had been slow to fully accept Aisha, their whispers quiet but persistent. Some still questioned whether she was fit to be Ryan's partner, whether she could handle the responsibilities of ranch life, or whether her presence was merely temporary. Aisha could feel the judgment in small glances and hushed comments. But Ryan stood by her firmly, his support unwavering. Whenever rumors or doubts reached her, he would remind her gently with words and gestures of reassurance that he valued her for who she truly was and no one else's opinion mattered. One afternoon, the couple faced a situation that tested not only their bond, but also their ability to work together. A wild animal had wandered onto the property, startling the livestock and causing chaos. Horses neighed and stamped their hooves, goats scattered, and the chickens panicked. Aisha felt a wave of fear but did not hesitate. She and Ryan quickly coordinated, guiding the animals to safety while ensuring no one was hurt. The teamwork required focus, trust, and quick thinking. In the end, the danger passed, and both were exhausted but relieved. Aisha felt a surge of pride, realizing that she could handle challenges on her own, with Ryan's partnership when needed. Ryan, observing her calm determination under pressure, felt his admiration deepen even further. Beyond challenges, there were moments of quiet tenderness that cemented their connection. In the evenings, they would walk along the fields, talking about dreams, sharing memories, or simply enjoying the soft glow of the sunset. Aisha had begun to let her guard down, laughing more freely, speaking more openly, and allowing herself to imagine a future that included Ryan. Ryan, for his part, found joy in these moments, watching her eyes light up when she described her favorite memories, noticing the way her laughter lingered in the air, and feeling a steady warmth in his chest whenever she reached for his hand. The turning point came when Ryan decided to publicly affirm his choice. During a small gathering with neighbors and relatives, he spoke with heartfelt sincerity. Aisha is not here as a replacement. She is herself, capable, kind, brave, and true. She has my respect, my trust, and my heart. I choose her not out of obligation, but because I want to spend my life with her. The words were simple, yet they carried immense weight. Aisha's eyes filled with tears, and the crowd's quiet murmurs turned into smiles of approval. The town finally began to see her as more than a substitute, as someone who had earned her place beside Ryan. Aisha felt a mixture of relief and joy. The fears that had haunted her, the worry that she was undeserving, the doubt that Ryan's feelings were merely polite courtesy, began to fade. She realized that love had grown between them, quiet but real, nurtured by shared experiences, mutual respect, and unwavering support. It was not a love born of circumstance alone. It was a love chosen, deep and genuine, built on understanding and trust. The following weeks were filled with moments that solidified their life together. They worked side by side on the ranch, laughed over small mishaps, and celebrated each success. Aisha taught Ryan small things from her childhood, like recipes her mother had shown her, while Ryan shared skills he had learned on the ranch, from mending fences to training horses. Each day strengthened their partnership, not only as a couple, but as a team capable of facing whatever life presented. One particularly peaceful evening, Aisha and Ryan sat together on the porch, watching the stars appear in the clear night sky. The ranch was quiet, the only sounds being the gentle rustle of leaves and the distant call of an owl. Aisha leaned her head on Ryan's shoulder, feeling the steady rhythm of his heart, the warmth of his presence, and the sense of safety that came from being truly known. Ryan's hand rested over hers, fingers intertwined, and he spoke softly. "I never imagined life could feel this full. You make every day brighter. I am grateful you are here." Aisha smiled, tears glimmering in her eyes, and whispered, "I never imagined I could feel this happy. I am grateful too for you, for this life, and for us." They shared a long, quiet moment, speaking in gestures and glances rather than words. The hardships of the past, the storm, the rumors, the initial fears, seemed distant now. What remained was a bond forged through courage, patience, and mutual respect. The trust they had built allowed them to be open, vulnerable, and completely themselves in each other's presence. The story of Aisha stepping in for her sister, once a source of anxiety and uncertainty, had transformed into a narrative of love, resilience, and new beginnings. She had replaced someone else, yes, but in the process she had discovered her own strength, her capacity for love, and her ability to shape her own destiny. Ryan, too, had learned to look beyond expectations, to value the heart and character of the person before him, and to embrace a love that was unexpected but wholly real. Eventually, the couple began to plan a future together beyond the daily life of the ranch. They spoke of dreams, expanding the land, supporting the community, and even starting a family of their own. Each plan was discussed with care, respect, and the understanding that they were building their life together as partners. Aisha felt a sense of peace she had never known. She no longer feared judgment or doubt, because she had Ryan's unwavering support and love. She also no longer feared her own heart, because she had learned that it was capable of courage, patience, and genuine affection. The final moment of their story came one bright morning, as the sun rose over the open fields. Aisha stood with Ryan near the edge of the pasture, the horses grazing peacefully nearby. He turned to her, took her hands, and looked deeply into her eyes. "From the first day, I never expected this," he said, voice filled with quiet emotion. "I never expected to feel this way, to find someone so true, so kind, and so strong. But here you are, and I choose you, always, forever." Aisha's heart swelled. She felt the journey, the fears, the challenges, the moments of doubt and courage culminate in this one truth. She smiled through tears and replied softly, "And I choose you, Ryan, not because it was expected, not because it was convenient, but because my heart has always known. I choose you forever." In that moment, under the wide, open sky, surrounded by the life they had built together, Aisha and Ryan embraced. It was more than a hug, it was the physical expression of trust, love, and commitment. They had faced unexpected challenges, overcome doubts, and discovered a love that was entirely their own. The world around them, fields, animals, and the quiet town, witnessed not a story of replacement, but a story of true choice, connection, and enduring affection. From that day forward, life on the ranch continued, but it was no longer just routine. Every sunrise brought the promise of shared adventure, every chore became an opportunity to work together, and every quiet moment became a chance to appreciate the bond they had nurtured. Aisha no longer felt like someone living in the shadow of her sister. She was a woman who had chosen courage over fear, love over uncertainty, and partnership over distance. Ryan no longer saw the past expectations or obligations. He saw a woman who had captured his heart and earned his respect, someone whose presence completed his life in ways he could never have imagined. And so, the story that had begun with fear, duty, and uncertainty ended with hope, love, and fulfillment. Aisha had replaced her sister in a wedding, but she had found something far greater than anyone had expected. A love chosen freely, a bond built on trust, and a life shared with a man who saw her for who she truly was. The journey had been long and full of challenges, but it had led them both to a place of true happiness, understanding, and a future bright with promise.